Good evening. My name is Robert Rogers. I'll be your moderator for this evening's debate, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of West Contra Costa County and KCRT. A reminder to our audience and our candidates to please turn off your cell phones or any other electronic devices. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization, which means we do not support candidates or political parties. We can, however, take positions on issues when they can be based on League studies. It is League policy to ask that no one display campaign buttons, signs, or literature within this room. The table in the hall in the back of the room contains materials for the audience to take. Tonight's debate will be between mayoral candidates in the city of Richmond. Our first candidate is current Mayor Tom Butt, and the challenger is Vice Mayor Melvin Willis. Consuela Lara will be circulating throughout the audience, gathering questions that can be filled out on index cards, and those questions can be considered for this forum. Thank you again all for being here. Tonight's format will include an opening statement of 3 minutes. Each question will have 2 minutes for each candidate to respond to, and a closing statement of 2 minutes will be offered to each candidate. Also, League of Women Voters B. Roberson and Naomi Williams will have placards and cards to indicate when time has almost elapsed, and that will be a signal for you candidates to please begin to wrap it up.
Not begin to wrap it up. At the end of that sentence, wrap it up.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, let's begin with our opening statements. Again, 3 minutes have been allotted. Let's begin with Vice Mayor Melvin Willis.
Okay, thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this candidates debate between the mayoral candidates. My name is Melvin Willis. I grew up in Richmond, and I'm running as a candidate that takes no corporate money. I've been an organizer in Richmond for 7 years with Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment. And since I've been an organizer, I've worked on issues for fighting for principal reductions and loan modifications for victims of the foreclosure crisis, successfully organized tenants to pass the first rent control law in 30 years, along with just cause for eviction. Since I've been on the city council, I led the efforts to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and my work in the county has allowed me to fight for a health care program to allow basic health coverage for those who are undocumented, and in the form of Contra Costa Cares, and also ending the practice of charging juvenile fines and fees that get in our criminal justice system and paying back the families that were illegally charged. Moving forward, what I want to do as mayor is make sure that City Hall is a place where issues and concerns can get worked on with local leaders and constituents working together, addressing the affordable housing crisis, our homeless issues, investing more money into youth programs and services to help increase public safety by investing in its people, and also working on fair scheduling and environmental issues like protecting our shorelines and addressing the coal train issues. I look forward to the rest of this night, and thank you all for hosting this and for coming out tonight.
Vice Mayor Willis, thank you very much. Mayor Butt, please, your opening statement.
Thank you also to the League of Women Voters for putting this on. So after 13 successful but challenging years with our former city manager, Bill Lindsay, who took us through the Great Recession, and it had a heavy toll on Richmond. The City Council went through an exhaustive search and selected a new city manager, Carlos Martinez of East Palo Alto, who starts exactly 2 weeks from today. My opponent voted not to hire Mr. Martinez, but he's been unable to articulate the reasons why. We need a mayor who has confidence in and can work with our new city manager, not one who starts off with doubts. The people deserve better. Even my opponent agrees that Richmond is going in the right direction. In his written candidate statement, he wrote, "Richmond is safer, healthier, and more prosperous." He's right. And this is not the time to change directions. We always have more work to do, but crime is down, budgets are balanced, Our credit rating is up, and we have the lowest unemployment rate in Richmond history. Over 1,000 scholarships have been awarded from the Richmond Promise program. The street repair budget has been doubled. The ferry is coming. We've saved the post office. We've stood up to Trump on immigration, on the environment, and on global warming. We don't need a radical change. We just need to work harder to reduce crime, provide housing for everyone, fix our streets, stop the dumping, and continue cleaning up our air and water. The choice is clear. You can select a candidate who, for me namely, for a second term with 19 years of experience on the city council, plus another 3.5 years as mayor, or you can select a candidate with 19 months experience on the city council. My opponent, I know he works hard, and I'll give him credit for a lot of work that he's done in the area of housing. I don't agree with him on all the initiatives he's been involved in, but he does work hard. I think he'll make a good mayor someday, but I don't think we're ready for that yet. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Willis and Mayor Butt, thank you very much for your opening statement. Let's begin with the first question, which we will begin with Mayor Butt as the first responder. On day one of the next administration, there will be many issues confronting the leader of the city, the mayor. Obviously, there'll be a lot to do in terms of deciding what priorities are going to merit the most attention. In your mind, on day one of the next administration, what is going to be your chief priority, and what will you do about it? Mayor Butt.
Well, my priorities have not changed. It's clear that, that public safety and crime are the highest priority of virtually all Richmond residents. And it is my job to try to do everything we can to make sure that our residents are safe. That's my highest priority. Probably the next one is infrastructure. The most complaints I get from people, other than crime-related complaints, have to do with the condition of their streets, the condition of their sidewalks, the condition of parks, dumping, and cutting of weeds and medians and things like that. So trying to get Richmond enough resources to take care of our infrastructure is my second highest priority. The third one is probably split among several things, including housing and homelessness, including trying to keep Richmond's budget in line. It's going to be a big challenge in the future for a lot of reasons. And then also increasing the kinds of services that people need for recreation, for libraries, the kind of things they expect from their city. So you're not going to see any radical change from me. I work on a lot of fronts all the time. I'm not a one-issue mayor. The people of Richmond are not one-issue people, and everybody has a different priority. And so what we try to do is we try to address them all and keep moving on all of them.
Mayor Butt, thank you. Vice Mayor Willis, same question.
Day one of the first things that I want to do, which also other candidates have mentioned this year, but after reaching out to community members and getting this feedback, it's an issue I want to take on. I want to work with the Central Labor Council, labor unions, and also the school district to introduce trade programs to the schools, so just in case young people feel like they're not college ready, they have a pathway into the workforce right out of high school, and making sure that there's a partnership between the city of Richmond, the school district, along with any other labor unions out there that can introduce these trades to folks. I am still currently a part of the homeless task force where I help facilitate those meetings and working on the safe encampment issue and using the resources of the mayor to make sure that the safe encampment and safe park issue is implemented right and correctly, and also ensuring that we have services available to people to get them out of homelessness as well. And I'm constantly going to be engaged around the issue of our affordable housing crisis and figuring out ways that we could bring more affordable housing to the city of Richmond. My hope is that Prop 10 will pass and we repeal Costa to be able to expand on our rent control ordinance and also institute vacancy control to ensure that not only do landlords still have a fair return on rent due to the California state constitution, but that we are expanding tenant protections and allowing ourselves to have stable neighborhoods, and also investing in the youth programs and services and making sure that those are fully funded so we can invest in our youth to have more of a prosperous future and give them the things they need as they're growing into a young adult.
Vice Mayor Willis, thank you very much. For the next question, let's continue along the path of homelessness. And Vice Mayor Willis, we'll go to you first. In your 2-minute response, please give us a detailed diagnosis of what you think is to blame for this long-term chronic crisis of homelessness in our community, and specifically what you can do in the mayor's office to alleviate this problem.
Well, we, not only in Richmond or the Bay Area, but California in general, we have an affordable housing crisis and also a shortage of housing as well. A lot of the work that I've done on the Homeless Task Force has identified that there are actually a fair amount of people that still make an income. They just cannot afford the expensive housing that is available right now. What I intend to do is to continue to work on the Homeless Task Force on this safe park, safe encampment issue, so we can give folks a safe place to go to be able to have an encampment. That way the homeless population is not in fear of being abated and possibly at risk of losing their belongings. And at the same time, there's groups that deal with mental health services and also a housing first approach. So working with those mental health services groups to bring them out here to Richmond. That way, if there is a homeless individual that is having a mental health episode or issue, they basically have housing in the back pocket to make sure that they are supporting that person with all the right services. And it's also going to take working with the county as well, because this is bigger than a city issue. It's something that affects the entire Bay Area. So making sure that we have a relationship with the county and any resources we can get from them to bring them to Richmond to help address the homeless population. And already some things that we've done is contracted $25,000 with GRIP shelters so they can be able to provide the services and expand on the homeless services that they already have, and also supporting the warming shelters that they want to be able to implement as well.
Vice Mayor Willis, thank you. Same question, Mayor Butt.
Well, there are 3 main causes of the homeless crisis: mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and of course the housing crisis. And the availability of affordable housing is a statewide crisis. It's caused by an imbalance between supply and demand, and ultimately we've got to balance that out so that the supply equals the demand and the cost of housing goes down. We can work away at that, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. So there are really 5 initiatives I've been involved in to directly address homelessness in Richmond right now. One of them is a managed home encampment. As an architect, I understand a lot about how to organize land uses and that sort of thing, and so I've designed a managed homeless encampment for at least 100 people. I've budgeted it out at about $1.5 million, and I'm out raising money to try to do it right now. I also put Measure T on the ballot. Measure T will provide about $5+ million, most of it to address homelessness and some of it to address dumping in Richmond. The City Council recently allocated $100,000 for the county to put a dedicated core team in Richmond. And I believe I've identified a source for an additional $60,000 that'll give them the money that they need to do that. And then finally, Contra Costa County has the resources and the funds that Richmond doesn't. So I'm working with Contra Costa County to make sure we get our fair share. And I'm also working with them on a 50-unit supported homeless housing project that's going to be built down near the old county health building off of McDonald and 37th Street. And we expect to have that under construction by the first of the year.
Thank you very much, Mayor Butt. Let's stay on the same topic of housing and development. In your assessment, what do we need in the city of Richmond in terms of housing? Do we need additional development? And if so, what should that development look like, and how will you achieve it? Let's start with Mayor Butt.
Well, you know, every time we do the housing element of our general plan, we start off with the regional projections of housing needs from ABAG. And our current projection of our current plan is somewhere, I think it's somewhere around 1,500 units shortage. And it's pretty much balanced between very low income and market rate. The middle categories, we've pretty much met our requirements in. So we definitely need more housing in Richmond. One of the things people think is that building market rate housing is not going to solve the affordability crisis, but they're actually wrong. Every time we build market rate for sale housing, it either, due to our inclusionary zoning ordinance, it either provides for affordable units in a project or it provides in lieu funds that can build even more in a different location. So when we build market rate housing, as a huge benefit with it, we get affordable housing, and we have to keep working on that. We've got a lot of other opportunities. You know, all affordable housing needs a subsidy, and I work constantly with the state and other organizations to try to get these subsidies in Richmond. We have an opportunity through new state legislation for subsidies. And we have an opportunity through cap and trade, and we have an opportunity through tax credits. And so part of my job as mayor is I'm a cheerleader for affordable housing. I meet with developers weekly and try to convince them to come to Richmond. And I tell them, look, I'll hold your hand, I'll walk you through the process, I'll make sure that your permits get expedited in every way they can, you know, within the law. And I think they appreciate that.
Thank you, Mayor Butt. Vice Mayor Willis, same question, and to reiterate, does the city need to develop additional housing? If so, what should that housing look like, and how would you advance that goal?
Yes, the city of Richmond does need to develop more housing. Along with the Bay Area and the rest of the state of California, we need to develop more housing in general because we have a housing shortfall, not only in California, but it's a nationwide issue. The kind of developments that I am interested in is, of course, first and foremost, affordable housing, because I want to make sure that folks in the city of Richmond have an affordable place to go. We have an abundance of overcrowding of households because people are bringing their incomes together just to make sure they have a roof over their head and make sure they're not homeless. But also I'm interested in mixed-use income developments as well, because I've seen a sense of, through my door knocking, I've seen financial segregation a lot of the times where you could tell where the poor neighborhoods are and where the more affluent neighborhoods are as well. So to desegregate our community, I think it's important that we have mixed income housing development to give people another sense of pride and purpose, and making sure that our population is mixing in together. And also at the same time, we need to increase our in lieu fees as well. And as we are working on currently in the city of increasing our in lieu fees and what our inclusionary housing will look like, we can also make sure that housing projects that do come in either have an affordable housing component to it, or they pay enough in lieu fees that we can generate enough revenue for affordable housing, and figure out how we could best place that to support housing for our residents in the city of Richmond.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Willis. The issue of Point Malade has become a lightning rod issue in this community. Point Malade is a shoreline jewel in the city of Richmond, and its future has become a source of great controversy. Some folks think that it should be mostly open space. Others, housing and other uses, are also in the realm of the ideas. Vice Mayor Willis, what's your vision for the future of Point Malade?
Well, I'll say this to begin with. My vision for Point Melati definitely isn't 670 units of housing on that shoreline for two reasons. One, it's right next to it's right behind the Chevron refinery, so there's a safety concern that if there's an incident, what would happen to those residents? Also, there really isn't the infrastructure, from my understanding, to support housing, and it's really a one-way in, one-way out kind of scenario, and the only way in to Point Melati is through the 580 heading towards San Rafael. I know this because I rode my bike there, and it was scary. So my vision is that it's someplace that my personal vision is someplace that is definitely is a place that has open space and definitely more of a regional park place like we have the Muir Woods or Angel Island, a destination location where people can come, they can have recreational uses for it, maybe even possibly a camp and fields. I've heard folks wanting to build bike shops over there so people can rent out bikes and be able to enjoy and coast along the shoreline, and even kayaking as well, and also making it a place where you can learn about all the great history about Point Melati and the different tribes and shrimp workers that were there as well. So I think there is a lot of economic opportunity without developing heavy infrastructure and housing, and it should be one of those destination places where it has rich culture, a lot of recreational activity, and possibly also a place that's like a retreat center where people can go for the weekends, or we can be able to enjoy the beautiful amenities that that place has to offer.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Willis. The same question to you, Mayor Butt. Your vision for Point Melati, and please provide ample evidence to support it.
My vision has not really changed since the City Council adopted the reuse plan 2 decades ago. The reuse plan provides for a mixed-use future of Point Melati. Most of it is preserved for recreation, 70% of it, Shoreline Park, Bay Trail, the uplands, and the remaining 30% is designated for development. Most of that 30% are existing buildings that are part of the Winehaven Historical District. And it also includes a housing element. And that housing element's really important because it's essential to have a complete neighborhood there. You don't want a place where somebody shuts the gate at sundown and the place goes dark. You want people around, you want eyes on the street, you want activity 24/7. So I think that's the appropriate vision for Point Melati. Now, the battle lines are drawn on this. There's some very strong feelings about it. But like my opponent, I actually get out and talk to people in Richmond. I do it a lot. And what I'm finding out is that most people in Richmond really don't have strong feelings about Point Melati. They like the idea that they can go there for recreation. They like the idea they might be able to go there to go to a restaurant or to participate in some other activity. But they also want Point Melati to throw off some money that will make their lives better, in Richmond, and if they don't decide to go out there. So the profit that Richmond will realize from doing housing and the property taxes, which are in the millions that Richmond will get out of that, can pay for things like fixing streets, like increasing our police department.
I think this issue merits follow-up, and I think it's an opportunity for you both to be able to engage your opponent's ideas on this issue. You have strikingly different visions for the future of Point Melati. Let's start with you, Mayor Butt. Vice Mayor Willis has a vision for open space and recreation. Your vision involves some of that, presumably, as well as additional housing and tax receipts and so forth. Why is the Vice Mayor, in your judgment, why is his idea for Point Melati not the right one for the city of Richmond?
Well, a long time ago, Richmond adopted a thing called the Ahwahnee Principles, which was sort of the constitution for smart growth, and it was integrated into our new general plan 2012. And and essentially what the Ahwahnee Principles does is say that that all neighborhoods in a city should have a diversity of uses. They should serve a diverse population, and they should include places where people work, where people play, and where people live. And that's what we're trying to create at Point Melati. Now, you've heard a lot of arguments about that. He talked about Chevron being over the hill. Yeah, it's over the hill, but it's also further away from Point Melati than my home is in Point Richmond. And it's separated by a 700-foot high ridge. And he talked about one way in, one out, one way out. You know, Point Melati is not, it's not some black hole. It's on a peninsula that's 4 miles long. It has access to ferry boats and boats. It actually has access to a railroad. It has access to the new Bay Trail. And there are a number of things in the mix right now that are going to alleviate that traffic problem on the San Rafael Bridge. So, you know, when you look at something and you look at it through blinders and you only see one thing, that's a problem. You know, you need to open up and start looking at what can we do in the future to address some of these issues and make them work. And I think that's where I differ. I'm a problem solver. We got a problem, we're going to solve it. I'm not somebody that says we got a problem, we just got to quit. We're not even going to try. And I think that's probably the main difference between us. I'm a problem solver. He's just given up on it.
Vice Mayor Willis, you indicated earlier that you believe that Point Melati development of housing there is unsupported by insufficient infrastructure surrounding the area, and that it could potentially be dangerous for those who live there. Please go into detail as to why the mayor's vision for Point Melati is not the right one for Richmond.
All right, first, no one said anything about giving up on it. I just said I don't believe 670 units of housing should be there, because there has to be a lot of work to make sure that there's piping, electrical lines, and things like that to be able to support housing. And on top of that, when I said I rode my bike to Point Melati, it was for my first time doing a tour there, and I actually typed it into my GPS, and there was only one way to get through there, which was from a abandoned corridor that led to the 580, and then the only way to get in there was off the 580 ramp heading to San Rafael. My concern is that if we don't have walkable corridor or walkable access, we will be isolating a community in this one area. So if we do have some sort of natural disaster or a fire, God forbid, happens, and there's an issue where people are not able to get out in case of emergency, that one way in, one way out issue is going to be a problem. And unless everybody at Point Melati owns a kayak or a boat or something, I mean, that's not really a feasible way to be able to get there and back. And also at the same time, for me, Point Melati is bigger than myself. It's bigger than 7 people on a board. It is something that is, what was said, the jewel of the community, meaning there needs to be a strong community visioning process and strong community engagement to figure out how we want to shape this moving forward, with the community leading the way and us as public officials being that public representative to represent that vision. My problem with the mayor is that he has his vision that he's been pushing, but has really alienated an entire community that has a problem with the settlement as it stands. And I'm not comfortable ignoring my constituents for what I believe should be the right thing to do there.
Vice Mayor Willis, thank you. We'll continue in the vein of infrastructure, and the first question will go to Vice Mayor Willis. Several years ago, the City of Richmond's residents supported you both, I believe, in the passage of a new tax, on a sales tax, to support infrastructure and particularly road improvements. As you both mentioned, City of Richmond roads are a constant concern of residents in the City of Richmond. There are further concerns about how that money has been spent in the years since the tax was passed. Please assess the use of that tax money, how well it has gone toward improving the roads in the City of Richmond, and how you will improve it. Vice Mayor Willis.
The use of that tax money so far went into the major deficit that we were in. Bottom line, I wasn't on the council or considering running for council at that time, but I do remember that tax, and I remember the discussion. I do remember it was supposed to go to roads. Me personally, I'm not comfortable pushing for certain tax measures if I don't know that they're earmarked for certain destinations, because I want to honor the integrity of what we're actually pushing for. So what that tax money ended up going to was making sure that we didn't have any layoffs or more services were not cut in the city of Richmond during this time of us climbing out of a deficit. And what we need to do is make sure that we're in line with the county and state to make sure that we are bringing in more funding and more money for our roads, and also working with our infrastructure and transportation district to figure out where some of the hot zones in the city of Richmond, where some of the major complaints, and using the existing budget that we have to be able to see to those complaints, whether it's road repairs or filling in potholes. It's important to really capture who's being impacted by this, how many folks are being impacted by this, how much of a nuisance is, and really strategically spending the limited budget we had and addressing it, because once again, this is something that affects more than just Richmond. It's a California issue from talking to other politicians and other jurisdictions.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Willis. Mayor Butt, same question.
Well, what you brought up is largely an urban myth. I actually initiated that measure because we had a presentation showing that if we didn't dramatically increase our spending on street maintenance, we were going into a downward spiral that almost had no end. And we had just lost redevelopment, and we'd used a lot of redevelopment money to do street maintenance. So we were facing a big problem. And looking at a sales tax to do this seemed like a good idea. As it evolved over the months, we came to realize that we had a lot of serious needs besides, in addition to streets. And we expanded the description of the measure to cover a number of other things, including public safety and other types of infrastructure. And that's actually what was on the ballot. This was a general tax. It wasn't earmarked for anything. But there are people out there who, they remember the beginning of it, and they got it into their heads that this was a street tax and that it was supposed to be spent 100% on streets. You know, if we'd spent it 100% on streets, we would have had to cut somewhere else. So, you know, city budgets are fluid, and you got to be able to react and deal with them in the moment. But, you know, right now we've got another crisis coming up. SB 1, passed by the legislature, signed by the governor last year, virtually doubled our street budget and gave us a path of improving our streets. Unfortunately, there's a measure on the state ballot, Prop 6, that will repeal that. So what we really have to concentrate on is getting people to understand that and getting to vote not to repeal that, or we're going to be right back where we started from. Actually, we're going to be worse. So my pitch is don't vote for Prop 6. Keep SB 1, keep your streets in good shape.
Mayor Butt, thank you. The next question is one that's been provided by the audience. What types of businesses, what sector of business would you like to prioritize to be part of the City of Richmond's future? And to that end, how do you plan to attract new and vibrant businesses to the city during the next administration? Mayor Butt, please begin.
Well, you don't always get to pick your businesses, but, you know, in the best of all worlds, I look for businesses that are clean and non-polluting, that offer jobs in a range of job skills and pay grades so that everybody has a shot at it. And I look for businesses that have an opportunity to expand and to be successful in Richmond. So in an ideal world, that's what I would look for. From a practical standpoint, I think that if you have an opportunity to bring a business to Richmond and it doesn't have anything negative about it, you go after it. And I've done a couple of things that I think have been very helpful. One is that I privately fundraised and completed a marketing and branding study that in the big picture, in the short description, is meant to change Richmond's image to one that is to make Richmond more attractive to businesses. and I think that's starting to work. The second thing I've done is I've had a series of business roundtables going back to the beginning, and we've talked to dozens and dozens of businesses. Typically what we do is we bring in businesses who have recently relocated or started in Richmond, businesses that are successful, that have at least several employees, and we ask them, why did you come to Richmond? Now that you're here, what do you think about it? And what can we do to make business more attractive to Richmond? And we've compiled a huge database, and we've used that as a tool to go out and effectively attract businesses to either move to Richmond or to start up in Richmond. And I intend to continue that. It's always a learning experience, and the more we know about how we can help business, then the better the chances are we have to bring business to Richmond.
Thank you, Mayor Butt. Vice Mayor Willis, same question.
Yeah, the businesses that I would be interested in is, we already have a couple, but what I hear a major call for is we need a grocery store in the city of Richmond. We also need a social gathering place, because I hear a lot of complaints from folks where people say there's nothing to do in Richmond, so they end up going to other cities and spending their money there. So a good place where we can have a social gathering, and also not to think too small scale, but even a bookstore too, because I have a lot of folks that actually like reading and enjoy books, but they would rather go to Richmond, but because that's not around, they want to be able to, they have to go other places. So one of the things that I would do to do that is using the staff of the mayor's office to really draw up like what are some of the major attractions to Richmond, and one thing is that we have a strong transportation corridor, so that's one thing where transportation's easily accessible to where I could see a business ending up in downtown Richmond, but also needing to troubleshoot and work with our planning and building department, because there have been people that have been interested in starting a business in Richmond, and they tell me a huge barrier for them is getting through the planning department. So seeing what incentives we can help provide to bring more businesses in, and how are we making it easier for folks that want to do business with Richmond to get through the process without it being a huge strain.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Willis. We've covered a range of important public policy topics that voters are very concerned about. Voters also want to know more about you as candidates. They're voting not only for the range of policy topics on which you've opined, but also on you yourselves. So the next question is about a bit of introspection. And so on that note, Vice Mayor Willis, both of you have been in public office for some time, and a big part of being in public office is making mistakes, adapting, and learning from those mistakes. Vice Mayor Willis, tell us about a mistake that you've made while you're in public office and what you've learned from that mistake.
I think one of the mistakes I made is we were working on our ECIA grant funding mechanisms and planning. Our staff checked in with us and said that the criteria was great and we were going to be able to equitably distribute out grants, and at the time I approved it. Then whenever we got the list in front of us, we found out that a lot of the folks that received the grants were previous recipients, and there was like 90 other people that were in line that never seen this money, and staff informed us. They said, hey, you already voted on this criteria. We talked about it a few months ago. Based on the criteria you adopted, this is the list again. And I admitted there publicly that I am sorry, we made a mistake, and ended up being on a subcommittee to change up the criteria, and it allowed more community-based organizations to get access to that grant money without just rinsing and repeating the same groups that have been getting it, because it's one-time money, and we want to make sure everybody has a chance. And one mistake that I know I made is that there was a moment where I did not maintain a quorum of professionalism, and I apologize for that publicly too, and learned from it and made sure that every time I'm here that it's not about me, it's about the residents of Richmond, and I just want to be the best representative I can and make all the right decisions, as subjective as that may be. Vice
Mayor Willis, thank you. Mayor Butt, same question.
You know, I can't think of any policy mistakes I've made that are significant. I think that probably if I wanted to do something different, you know, I would work on my temper. I'm a person that doesn't fly off very often. I do it, you know, maybe once a year, maybe once every 3 years, but sometimes it just gets to me. And, you know, people have known that I've thrown some things. I've yelled at some of my fellow city council members. I've gotten up and left meetings. And, you know, over the last 23 years, I've developed a pretty thick skin. But every now and then somebody finds a way through it, and, you know, I just lose it. But it doesn't happen very often. It's, that's a good thing. So that's something I need to work on. I don't have a lot of patience. I want things done quickly. I want staff to perform well and not make mistakes. I don't like things to sit around and linger. I like to get them done. Sometimes when that doesn't happen, it just gets to me.
Mayor Butt, thank you. For our last question, we're going to go to perspective and character. By nature in these contests, we spend a lot of time talking about why we are better than the other candidate or why we're more worthy of that vote. Now is a good time to think about what is good about that other candidate. Now, Mayor Butt, to your credit, you've already said that Melvin Willis is a hard worker, so we'll not use that again. But Mayor Butt, and this will come to you also, Vice Mayor. Mayor Butt, tell us something nice, a strength that you see in your opponent, and give us some detail about how you've reached that conclusion.
Well, I think the biggest strength is that he's interested in public service. I think anybody who is willing to go through the rigors of a campaign and you know, volunteer to put themselves up for election and go through debates like this, it says a lot for him. And you know, even though I disagree with him on some things, I actually agree with him on far more than I disagree with. I think the areas where we disagree are the ones that everybody focuses on, things like Point Melati and rent control and that kind of thing. But you know, by and large, our issues are the same. We vote the same, and the city's better for it.
Mayor Butt, thank you. Vice Mayor Willis, something laudable about your opponent.
I will say that one thing that I definitely respect about the mayor is his relentlessness. Like, whenever he makes a decision on something, yeah, and a lot of y'all know what I'm talking about. Whenever he makes a decision on something, a call, has done his own research and checked in with the appropriate parties he feels the need to check in on, he is relentless in his stand, and he will fight and fight and fight regardless of what anybody else has to say. And this has been demonstrated plenty of times. And as one stubborn person that fights for community members and wants to stay strong in my values to another, that's something that I've always respected about Mayor Butt 100%, is that he is as stubborn as I am. And when we dig our heels down, it's a unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. So that's my respect for the mayor.
Thank you both. Those were both quite nice. And now we've come to our portion for the final statement. So you each will have 2 minutes, and please make your case in as much detail as you can why the residents of Richmond should vote for you to be the next mayor. Vice Mayor Willis.
Well, thank you again to the League of Women Voters. Just to reiterate, my name is Melvin Willis, and I grew up here in Richmond my whole life. And since I've been a community organizer for the past 7 years, when I first got involved on this, it was a way to be able to make a living and support myself and the people that I care about. Never that I dreamed that it would make me deeply invested in Richmond and be able to engage with my neighbors and fellow community members that felt the same as I did about issues around safety, around opportunity, around stability. And I've had the pleasure and opportunity and gratification to be able to work on housing issues, to be able to work on youth programs and service issues, environmental issues, and holding Chevron accountable, been able to support support working people's rights to ensure that they have fair health care benefits or increasing the minimum wage, supporting those coming back from reentry by supporting issues like banning the box on job applications and housing to ensure that we're not discriminating against those who are coming back into reentry and giving them an opportunity to be a part of this community. Richmond is my home, and a lot of the times on the issues that we've all worked on, all it takes is political willpower to get something done. And community members are always crying out for solutions and change, and a lot of the times we come across people that are turning their backs on the community, and I want to be the representative for all the community members I reach out to and organize with, because I recognize that the city of Richmond is bigger than 7 people on the board, and it takes all of us to work together to fight for real solutions, and that's true democracy, and that's why I'm running for mayor in Richmond, to be the voice and be the conduit that makes sure that your issues and concerns in your community gets addressed with the help of the mayor's office leading it. So thank you so much for this forum again, and vote for Melvin Willis on November 6th.
Vice Mayor Willis, thank you. Mayor Butt, your closing remarks, please.
You know, the city charter sets up a 2-term limit for mayors, 2 4-year terms, 8 years. Most Richmond mayors have served those 2 terms. And I think the presumption is that if you have a mayor who's doing a good job, you know, you want to continue with that, and you want to take advantage of that experience and that leadership. And by all accounts, I think we've done a good job. Even my opponent wrote in his filing statement that Richmond is safer, healthier, and more prosperous. So I think most people believe we're going in the right direction. We always have more work to do. But I don't think there's any compelling argument anybody can make that now's the time we need to change mayors. And I think that, as I said before, he's a hard-working city council person. I think it's highly likely that someday he may be mayor of Richmond, but I don't think it's going to be January. So I urge him to keep doing what he's doing. Let's try to find common ground. Let's try to work together where we are. But let's don't upset the apple cart and do something radical when things are going well. And I said before, we have a new city manager coming in 2 weeks. I think that that's going to be a big change for Richmond. And I think that we need the stability and the leadership and the experience, you know, that I have to try to make that transition go as well as possible for the people of Richmond.
Mayor Butt, thank you. Thank you to both Mayor Butt and Vice Mayor Willis for a spirited and enlightening debate here this evening. Thanks especially to the League of Women Voters of West Contra Costa County for hosting this forum, as well as KCRT for televising this forum for the people at home. Thanks so much to the City of Richmond and our audience here today. Thanks to B. Roberson and Naomi Williams and Joan Carpenter for your excellent work in organizing this debate. And thank you all again. Good night.